Welcome to church. Hey, who's excited to spend their night in church? Come on, wave at me. There, you could have been in bed, you could have been feet up watching the TV, but look at you in church. Tell the person next to you, say, look at you. Look at you in church. Yeah. Awesome. Hey, we are in this series, Characters. We're taking this month and next month to look at different Bible characters and kind of examine their lives and see maybe what they can teach us, or maybe look at what lessons they've learned that we can apply to our lives, or maybe how they could challenge us. And we're looking at the common ones, you know, like your Paul and your Gideon, they'll be there. And we're looking at our not so common ones, our downright weird ones. Ryan's going to come at you with one of those ones. But tonight I get the privilege of part 3 of the character series. We've covered Paul and we've covered Daniel. And tonight we're covering a character whose name we don't actually know, whose story we don't really know up until the point that we meet this person, whose future after this interaction that we're about to read about we don't really know. But she goes by the name of the Canaanite woman. The Canaanite woman. Turn to the person next to you and say, the Canaanite woman. There's 2 accounts of this woman in the Gospels. The other account is found in Mark chapter 7, where he would call her the Syrophoenician woman. But I figured for your note-taking and my speaking purposes, it'd be easier to say Canaanite woman. It's a little easier to spell and a little easier to say. And she's found in Matthew 15. Matthew 15 is where we're going to be spending our whole time. And as I said, we don't really know a whole lot about her. We don't even know her name. But in 8 short verses, her interaction with Jesus is nothing short of amazing. And her faith is shocking. Shockingly great, that is. In fact, there's probably only one other time that I can recall in the Gospels where Jesus encounters shocking faith. It's the kind of faith that would stop him in his tracks and demand that he would do a miracle in the person's life. And I thought it'd be cool to enter into this story and enter into the narrative of this woman and see what lessons we could learn from her interaction with Jesus that we could maybe apply to our lives and maybe be a bit better off because of it. But before I get into it, I want to set up the context. You see, this passage is wild. If you've read it before, you'll be familiar with it. It's a wild passage. And I want to set up a bit of context before we go there. So this woman's a Canaanite, as I said. Excuse me. This woman's a Canaanite, and Jesus is a Jew. And it's important to note that because the Canaanites and the Jews, they didn't get along all that well. There was racial tension, there was religious tension, and they just weren't the best of buddies. And what we're about to see Jesus do is twofold. He's about to do a miracle in this woman's life, and we're going to zoom in on that and examine that. But the other thing that he's about to do is teach his boys, the disciples, a lesson about the gospel. That it's the whole gospel to the whole world. The Jews at the time had a limited understanding of what the gospel was and what Jesus had came to do. And we're about to see him set himself up as a mirror, if you would, and reflect the heart's intention of the disciples by his actions with this woman, but then in that moment break through with grace and do an awesome teaching to his disciples that it's the whole gospel for the whole world. And so Matthew 15:21, it's where we read, leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from the vicinity came to him, crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly. And Jesus did not answer a word. And so his disciples, with their limited understanding, they came and urged him, hey, send her away, for she's crying out after us. And this would have been the appropriate thing for a Jew to do. But Jesus answers, remember, he's setting himself up as a mirror. I was only sent for the lost sheep of Israel. But then this woman, you're going to see, she's kind of crazy. And sometimes in life, you've got to be a little crazy, you know? You can't always just be cute. Sometimes you've got to be a little crazy. And she came down and knelt before him. And she said, Lord, help me. Have you ever been in that situation where it's so complicated and it hurts so much and it disrupts your life so much that you don't really know what to say? You don't really know how to articulate the emotions that's going on in your heart. The only thing you can come out with is, Lord, help me. That's where this woman is. Lord, help me, she says. And Jesus, still teaching a lesson to his boys, he says, it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Yes, it is, Lord, she says. She's crazy. Because even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. I may be a dog in your Jewish people's eyes, but all I need is a crumb. I don't need to take up much of your time. I just need a crumb from you. All I need is a crumb. And Jesus says to her, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed in that moment. In front of his disciples, and this was probably right about the moment where their jaws hit the floor, as they were probably expecting Jesus to send her away, but in a beautiful way, he extends grace into this woman's life. And because of what the mother said, the daughter was healed. And I just want to pause there for a minute. Because of what the mother said, the daughter was healed. Hey, parents, don't ever stop praying for your kids. Don't ever stop praying for your kids. Need it. Take it from me as a youth pastor here. Your kids need your prayers. That praying parent thing, it's a powerful thing. And they need it. But I want you to notice the dynamic between this woman's faith for a crumb and the size of her situation. She says, my crisis is huge. And I know I'm not allowed the whole loaf, but if you were just to break me off a crumb, Jesus, I have enough faith that a crumb of your power is enough for the pain of my crisis. But all I need is a crumb. All I need is a crumb. So this woman starts off and she's in a crisis. Really, it's the crisis of her life. It's the kind of crisis that threatens to break her heart. It's the one that would keep her up at night and take away her appetite. And I found out in my short 25 years of living that we sometimes find ourselves in these crises. You know what I mean? We find ourselves in these moments of crisis. And I've realized with my limited time here on earth that there's really only one thing that's sure about life. That one thing is change. You don't really know where you're going to be from moment to moment. I mean, you can make plans, and you can have schedules, and you can have to-do lists, and you can have dreams and aspirations, but I figured out that only one text, just one email, just one phone call can derail your whole life. No one in this room can escape change. If it's bad right now, don't worry, it'll change. If it's good right now, hold on, anchor yourself, because it'll change. And what I found out, and maybe you know this to be true, that oftentimes when change happens, crisis happens. They happen together. They happen to good people. They happen to bad people. They happen to religious people, to non-religious, to rich, to poor, to black, to white. Change comes for everyone. If you're in this room today, none of you are escaping change. And no one in this room today is escaping crisis. It happens to all people. And a crisis will push you. See, we can manage problems. We're familiar with problems. If you've got breath in your lungs, you're familiar with problems. And we can manage problems within the context of our day. But when a problem becomes a crisis, see, a problem becomes a crisis when it gets so bad and it hurts so much that it disrupts your life. It's the problem that you cannot ignore. It's the haymaker that you never saw coming that sweeps you off your feet. It's the thing that's stuck in your mind, and no matter how hard you try, you can't get it out of your mind. It's the kind of problem that takes the joy away from your laughter and the smile off your face. And if it gets so bad, you think to yourself, I wonder if I'll ever smile again. You can live with a problem, but a crisis, it needs some kind of resolution. Does anyone know what I'm talking about tonight? A crisis. See, this is where our woman is. Her daughter is suffering terribly. And we don't really know what that means. Maybe she was suffering emotionally, maybe it was physically, but what we do know is that it was so bad that it drove this mother out of her home in desperation for help. You know, when I was growing up, My parents would often have this saying, and maybe your parents said it too, or parents, maybe you say it too, and would go something like this, hey Aaron, whatever goes on in this house stays in this house. You're familiar with it, right? Whatever happens in this house stays in this house. If it's good, if it's bad, if it's the downright ugly, come on, you know what I'm talking about. If it happens in this house, it stays in this house. But can I suggest that there is a level of a problem that will push you out of your comfort zone? There's a level of a crisis that will drive you out of your home, that will drive you out of your comfort zone in desperation for help. See, when it's a crisis, all normalcy goes. And all you can do is cry for help. And this is where this woman's at. She takes a risk and she seeks out Jesus. She's seeking him not because she knows who he is. She isn't a Jew. She doesn't believe in the Messiah. It's not because she believes in him. It's because she's heard that he's a miracle worker. And what's crazy about that is it's not even that Jesus came to her. She came to him. And this kind of contradicts the way that I thought faith worked. You see, I used to think that faith was just wait on the Lord. You know, those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. If you just wait on the Lord, that's what faith looks like. And it's kind of like we treat faith like a bus stop. And if I just kind of sit here and if I wait long enough, and I was told that my faith was proven by how long I could hold on and how long I could grip my teeth. And if I just hang here and if I suffer long enough and if I endure it long enough, just maybe the bus of grace will turn the corner and pick me up and I'll make it. But that's not what I see in this story. In fact, if the woman just stayed and waited, Jesus would have passed on by and she would have missed it. See, James 2, it says, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say that you have faith and you don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food and clothing and you say, goodbye, have a good day, stay warm and eat well, but then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it's dead and useless. Faith without actions is dead. And so what if this whole time you're waiting on God while he's waiting on you? To get audacious enough, to get desperate enough, to step out of your comfort zone, to step away from your familiar, to come out of your home and whatever it takes, Jesus. If I got to raise my hands and worship for the first time, God, I'll raise it. If it means I got to go and have that conversation, God, I'll do it. If it means I got to come down to my left, your right, and ask the prayer team for help and swallow my pride and allow my problems to leave home, God, I'll do it, whatever it takes. I'm desperate. See, sometimes you got to go out of your way. I don't know how far she had to go out of her way. I don't know how many kilometers she had to walk or how many rocks she would have had to cross or valleys that she would have had to go through, but she was willing to go out of her way. And that's my first lesson from the Canaanite woman. You've got to be willing to go out of your way. Tell your neighbor, you've got to be willing. You've got to be willing. You've got to be willing to go out of your way to fix that relationship. You can't just pray about it. You got to be willing to go out of your way to get that job. I know it's Jehovah Jireh, he provides, but you got to be willing to go out of your way. You got to be willing to go out of your way to come into the presence of the God. That's not the worship team's job. They're not doing it for you. You got to be willing. You got to be willing to let go of your comfort, to lay down your pride, to do whatever it takes. Oh, I love this St. Augustine quote. He says, pray as though everything depended upon God and work as though everything depends on you. Are you willing to go out of your way? She went out of her way, up the coast. She crossed the rocks to come to see Jesus. But here's the crazy thing about the story. When she gets to Jesus, the loving Jesus, the compassionate Jesus, the healing Jesus, the walking on water, when she finally gets to Jesus, close enough for him to see her and close enough for him to hear her, she cries out to him respectfully, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. I'm not trying to be important. I'm not trying to say that I deserve it, but have mercy on me. My daughter, Jesus. There's a crisis at home that drove me out of my home. My daughter, Jesus. And the loving Jesus. The compassionate Jesus. The healing Jesus. He says to her, Verse 23, Jesus did not answer her a word. He didn't answer her a word. Church, what do you do when you're in a crisis? And you come out of your way and you cross the rocks and you come out in desperation and you come to church and God's silent? What do you do when you knock and you seek and you pray and you do what you got to do, but God is silent and your prayer goes unanswered? I want to talk for a moment about surviving the silence. Because we all know what to do when the walls come down, right? We all know what to do when the fish and the bread are multiplied. Like we jump around and we're, oh, la, la. We know what to do when God comes through. But what do you do when you come out of your way and Jesus, the loving God, you cry out to him and he says not a word? She was respectful. She addressed him by his messianic name, which is crazy in itself. She's a Canaanite. She says, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. She was humble. She said, have mercy on me. She was honest. My daughter, Jesus. She's demon-possessed. And the answers are not a word. But listen, I love this woman. I love this. She's crazy. She doesn't let the silence stop her. And can I encourage you, if you feel like you're in a place of silence tonight, don't let the silence stop you. Because God's silence does not mean he's absent. God's silence is not the absence of God's presence. So she just keeps on coming. She goes, all right, you want to play it that way? She gets down on her knees and she says, Lord, help me. And she begins to worship him. Fix me. Do something in me. And then she worships him. And I think, church, that's what real worship looks like. That's what real worship, because it's easy to worship when things are going good, but what about when it hurts? And what about when you feel more with doubt than you do faith? And everyone's looking in your life who aren't Christians and are just waiting for you to tap out and they're waiting for you to walk away. But look at you here tonight, standing up in church, praising your God. Look at you still coming up, still clapping your hands, still raising your hands in worship. That's real worship. That kind of worship makes our enemy nervous. That's the kind of worship that drove Job to say, though he slay me, yet I will trust him. And I'm asking you, church, would you be willing to worship him despite the silence? In spite of the crisis, in spite of the pain, would you be willing to go out of your way and then worship him? She leaves her home and then she gets down on her knees, and herein lies the second lesson. You need to get into position. Get into position. See, sometimes we approach persistence like if I pray, and 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 if I pray loud enough, and if I pray hard enough, and if I pray spiritual prayers, and if I sound like a Christian, and if I stomp my feet while praying, then just maybe I'll twist God's arm, and the God who apparently is far off and not near to me, maybe I'll convince him to bless me. And maybe God will come through, and I'm being persistent. But yeah, I actually don't think that's what persistence looks like. Because the Bible says that Jesus came near to us. It's Emmanuel, it's God with us. See, I think persistence isn't just about prayer. I think it's about position. She asked Jesus, Lord, help me. And he's silent. And so her prayer is met with silence. So what does she do? She positions her heart before him. And she puts her heart into a posture of worship, and she worships him. And she offers him a sacrifice of praise. And I think if God had a weak spot, like if Jesus had a weak spot, I think praise would be it. I kind of imagine like he's trying to teach his boys a lesson, they ignore her. But, she's like, stop doing that. Like she's doing that praising thing, and I can't take my eyes off it. See, I think when we praise God, it inclines his ear towards us. But remember, Jesus is teaching his boys a lesson. And so he says, I was sent only for the lost sheep of Israel, verse 24. But what do you do when the prayer goes answered, but not the way that you thought? Well, this is what the woman did. She just kept praising him anyhow. I'll keep praising you anyway. I'll praise you through the silence. She didn't keep asking. She didn't argue with him. She didn't beg him. She didn't try and twist his arm or convince him. She brought a petition before him, and then she gets down in position and worships him. Verse 26, though, it kind of gets weird. Jesus says, it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. You've come to see me about your child's crisis, and you want me to give my children's bread to your child. And what's crazy about this is when you look at that word bread and what it means, he's talking about healing and deliverance, the exact things that her daughter needs. And he's telling her, why would I take the healing and deliverance for my children and give it to your child? Now, when he says the word dog, he's not being malicious or rude towards her. He's using the colloquial language of that time to say, you're not in a covenant relationship with me. You're not part of my people. But I told you, this woman's crazy. She's like, yeah, that might be the case. I may not be a churchy, and I may not really understand who you are, but verse 27, yes, it is, Lord, she says. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. In other words, she was talking about a custom of that time that Jesus would very much be aware of. You see, the master would have a dog who would get up under the table and oftentimes sit on the lap. It would be a lap dog. But what the dog is doing is he's getting in position. And he's waiting to catch anything that falls from the table. And this Canaanite woman saying, yeah, I might be a dog. And I know there might not be a seat around that table for me. And I know that bread isn't for me. But if I get in position, any way that you choose to bless me, Lord, I'll catch it. I'll catch the crumb and I'll be satisfied. Tell your neighbor, get in position. That's why church is important. This isn't some religious thing that we just do on a Sunday. Man, if that's the case, this is boring for you. This is us getting in position. This is me repositioning my heart before Him. That's why we pray. That's why we study the scriptures. That's why we practice generosity. Because if I can position my heart close enough to Jesus' heart, any way that He chooses to bless me, be it a crumb, I'll be satisfied. Yeah, I was thinking about baking. Any bakers in the house? Just wave at me, bakers. Now, don't hate on me because I like to bake, but I may not be the best baker. But I was thinking about baking, right? And I was thinking about, you know how you get your butter and you melt your butter and you get your sugar and you put your sugar in with your butter and you get your egg whites and you kind of beat it all in so it's all one from the other. And then you might get a dash of vanilla essence, you know, and you might just kind of drop a little splash in there. And you're kind of beating it together, and maybe then you put your dry ingredients in. Come on, bakers, you put your flour in and your bicarb soda, and I don't know, help me here. And I'm baking it, right? And you kind of mix it up, and it gets to the point where you can't tell the sugar from the butter, the eggs from the flour. It's all kind of mixed in. And then you put it in the oven and you bake it. The truth of the matter is, when that cake comes out, it's smelling good. You ready to dig in? When that cake comes out, if you were to break a crumb, and if you were to take that crumb to a science lab, and if you were to get a scientist to investigate the crumb, the scientist would be able to tell you every ingredient that's in the cake. Because if there's egg in the cake, there's egg in the crumb. If there's sugar in the cake, there's sugar in the crumb. If there's flour in the cake. What I'm trying to say is everything that's in the cake is in the crumb. And this woman says, Jesus, you are so powerful that you can go ahead and give the bread to your children, but give me the crumb because everything that's in the cake, come on, someone. The church this morning got way more excited, is in the crumb. All I need is a crumb. I'm trying to say that thing that looks so big to you, that crisis that's been tormenting you for weeks now, our God is so powerful that if He was to drop you a crumb of His power is enough to fix that marriage. I've seen it in my parents' life. A crumb of His power is enough to take a dysfunctional family and bring it back together. A crumb of His power is enough to bring healing. And she says, Jesus, I'll take the crumb because everything that's in the bread is in the crumb. And I think God intentionally gives us crumbs. You see, because if He was to give you the whole loaf, you would take the loaf and run off with the provision and forget about the provider. But you see, when He gives me a crumb, it gives me enough sustenance and assurance and faith to take another step, but I still need to be reliant upon Him. And then He gives me another crumb, and I take another step, but I still got to be reliant upon Him. So in my weakness, His strength is made perfect. And so a crumb keeps me within His grace. So He doesn't give us the whole loaf, but He gives us the crumb. The third lesson from this Canaanite woman is this: hold on to expectation. expectation, hold on to a strong belief that something will happen. Have you ever noticed the first thing the enemy does when you're in a crisis is he tries to shut your mouth? He tries to get you to a place where you no longer praise him, and you no longer pray to him, and you no longer find counsel in your loved ones. And it's not even that people aren't around you, you're just in solitary. You've just isolated yourself from everyone around you. But learning a lesson from partly the woman and partly the dog, you can't catch a crumb with your mouth closed. You see, the opening of the mouth is a sign of the expectation of the heart. The opening of the mouth is a sign of the expectation of the heart. And we survive the silence, yes, when we get into position, but also when we come out of isolation and we hold on to expectation. And we praise our God despite the pain. And we pray to him despite the distress in my life. When I come out of isolation and I hold on to expectation. And this woman says, Jesus, all you got to do is let it fall. If you let it fall, I'll catch it. I'll catch the crumb that falls from the master's table. And right after she says that, Jesus is like, this conversation's over. We don't need to continue. You're going to get your miracle. Because she understood who he was to the degree that she would wait on a crumb while his children ignore the loaf. Matthew 15:28, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And the daughter was healed in that moment. Because of what the mother said, the daughter was healed. And Jesus revealed himself to her in that moment through something she did understand, the crumb, despite everything that she didn't understand. And maybe tonight you find yourself in a place of crisis and you can't really explain it and you don't really understand it. But can I encourage you that Jesus, if you hold on, if you get yourself into position and you hold on to expectation and go out of your way, Jesus will reveal himself to you through what you understand despite everything you don't understand. I want to leave you with one last lesson and then we're going to pray. This woman could intercede for her child because her daughter was one from among them. It was bone of her bone. It was flesh of her flesh. She loved her daughter. She understood what was at stake. She understood what she had to lose. She caught the gravity of the situation. And I truly believe that you cannot pray for me unless you love me. You cannot pray for me unless I matter to you. Unless you hurt because I hurt. Unless you cry because I'm crying. See, here's the final lesson from the Canaanite woman. You have the power to change what you care about. You have the power to change what you cry about. What breaks you because it's broken. What moves you because it's hurting. What wells up all this emotion inside of you when you hear about it. What disrupts your life because it's not the way it should be. That thing that hurts you the most, you have the power to change the most. You know, my mom, she's a very sweet lady. I think the sweetest of any. And she's a kind lady, always ready, always willing to trust, always willing to love, always willing to pour out her heart for people and believe in people. But there's a side to my mom where if you mess with something or someone that she cares about, you do not want to get in her way. Like if you mess with someone that she loves, she'll go full Clarkson on you. If you mess with someone that she cares about, I don't care if it's Mike Tyson, she'll knock them flat on their back if she has to because she cares. And I'm asking you tonight, church, what do you care about? What breaks your heart because it's broken? That's what you have the power to change. And when the passion on the inside becomes greater than the problem on the outside, you will always overcome. But you've got to hold on to the ability to care. You got to hold on to that passion. Hold on to that ability to cry for when someone's crying, because what you care about, you have the power to change. Would you stand to your feet across this auditorium?